the way of thy precepts. So shall I talk of thy wondrous works. My soul melteth for heaviness. Strengthen thou me according to thy word. Remove from me the way of lying, and grant me thy law graciously. I have chosen the way of the truth. Thy judgments have I laid before me. I have stuck to thy testimonies. O Lord, put me not to shame. I will run the way of thy commandments.
All right, hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. All right, and we're continuing the book of James today. And I'm going to begin reading the whole chapter first, like we do all the time, to get a general overview and to return ourselves to the context of James that we're in. We're going to pick it up at verse 9 in focus, but we're going to start off by reading the whole chapter. Here we go. Verse 1, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect, and entire, wanting nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Sorry, I'm mumbling. Let me, 1 second here. Okay, thank you. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Verse 9, let the brother of low degree rejoice in that he is exalted, but the rich in that he is made low. Because as the flower of the grass he shall pass away. For the sun is no sooner risen with a burning heat, but it withereth the grass, and the flower thereof falleth, and the grace of the fashion of it perisheth. So also shall the rich man fade away in his ways. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust, and enticed. Then, when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Do not err, my beloved brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. Of his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that we should be a kind of firstfruits of his creatures. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Wherefore, lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any be a hearer of the word, and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass, a mirror. For he beholdeth himself, and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty, and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed. If any man among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So that's chapter 1. And it does break up nicely. James has almost like you can see he's got almost, not exactly a list, but he's got groups of things. He's got ideas he likes to cover in little pieces. It can be broken into paragraphs, but he says different things he likes to address. So we talked about asking wisdom and not being double-minded, especially about that. Not being of two-minded. Being, that word literally means like double-spirited or whatever. I used to almost run my whole study like that. I'd be like, okay, double-minded is daisukos, meaning double-spirited. Unstable is astatos, meaning no standing. But I really find that to be not interesting. I mean, I used to do it because I thought that academic pursuit, and it was sometimes revealing, and we still do that, right? We still do look up words when we're not sure. We're not going to go through every word like that. Because in English, it's plain enough. It's plain enough. And that's the thing. We got to get what it is plain enough being said right to our faces first. We start worrying about subtleties. I mean, unless the text itself is actually, there's some sort of problem with it, or the translation is problematic or confusing. Rarely do you have a clearly translated passage or where the translation seems clear. Well, there are a few instances. And that's mostly because of the nature of English being changed over the past couple hundred years. I mean, some words in the Old Testament, like when it says, for example, in Genesis 3? No, 2. Is it 2 or 3? I think it's 2. When he speaks to man right after being created, he says, go forth and multiply, replenish the earth. People see that, my original teacher, Arnold Murray, and a lot of people look at that replenish, and they make a big deal about it, saying it means that the earth was once populated, and that this is a repopulating of the world. And then they posit a lot of suppositions about what that might imply. But the thing is, the word in Hebrew does not say replenish as we would think in modern English to fill again. You know what I mean? Like, if I take an empty, in the King James English, it just meant to fill. It did not explicitly denote fill again in Old English. Not Old English like like Old Middle English, but in Old Modern English, I should say, because that's what King James is. It's Old Modern English, I guess. I don't know what the technical designation is, but it's slightly different. We use that prefix pretty strictly now. Not entirely though, but I mean, we think of as like, if I say replenish, we think of it as being distinct from plenish or fill. But we never say plenish. We always say replenish. No one says plenish my cup. We say replenish and we mean refill, but Genesis doesn't, and that's the point. That's confusing, and that we're not going to go into that unless it's that way. So, let a brother of low degree rejoice in that he is exalted. But the rich in that he is made low. So the brother of low degree, low station, and that's in opposition to the rich. This means just outwardly what they have. And we talked about, and not here really, we talked about poverty of spirit. No, that was back in Isaiah, actually. I'm still thinking back to that. So we're talking about real poorness in the world. Or not just poverty, but like the sense of like station also. Powerful, rich, those things often go together. And in the things of God, the brother of low degree is exalted. Meaning the things that are in the earth are upside down, and God, and then in the Lord, he reverses off our fortunes, that we may be poor in this world, but we are rich in God, and he is rewarding us. Not because we're poor, but there are riches in store for us in God's kingdom. Right? Now the rich, he's got a problem. There are riches in store for him in God's kingdom, but he's got all these riches now. And moreover, they tend to be a barrier between God and men. Riches The deceitfulness of riches, Jesus himself called it. The deceitfulness of riches. Riches deceive. How do they deceive? Well, one, they make you feel you're secure. You're not. That's a lie. If you take your security in your wealth, you are transgressing against the Lord as far as your faith is in the wrong thing. Nothing wrong with managing your money properly or whatever. I don't know. I never have. No, like I said, I've lived month to month for year to year. And, I'm so used to it. Like when it talks about being tossed, like I remember when I used to be tossed all the time. I like I said before, the double-mindedness, I'm not of two minds about God, but of some things I am. You know what I mean? And it does lead to instability in your life. When you're uncertain. When you ask God, you should say, God, I want wisdom. Be certain about it. Don't be of two minds on the subject. It reminds me of when Jesus talked about the guy who was going to build a tower, but he didn't count the cost. You know what I mean? When you don't appreciate what you're going into, sometimes there's a failure to count the cost, and then you can find yourself of two minds, like, I don't know if I should have done this. And in a sense, I'll say this, it's like, I look at this verse, rich and poor, and I apply it to myself in a different way. It's because I'm rich in other things. God has blessed me in my mind. And I say that without any, whatever. I was told that from my youth, and I see it, but it's also a burden, just like riches in this world. Riches, people consider it, you are blessed, you were born in a wealthy country. Like I've often, I say I don't really consider myself to be impoverished, but I'm certainly, by comparison to the people who I live in proximity to, I mean, they are rich compared to me. Compare me to someone living in Africa, not so, right? But also, in a certain degree, that like, I think having richness of, sometimes being simple-minded, but not simple-minded. Well, I don't want, like, not a simpleton, but not overly complicated. I mean, there is such an overcomplication. And sometimes being rich mentally, meaning being very intelligent, causes a lot of instability from the overthinking everything. And some people say, boy, yeah, Paul, yeah, you're sure onto something there. As far as if I would be accused of overthinking things, well, that might be true. But, and all man and his ways and his riches and his thoughts will perish, right? The thoughts of man, but the Lord endures forever. So in the rich, people who are rich, though, in whatever ways, it means you have now a problem. He is brought low. Rejoice in that you are made low. And that's the thing. It's a hard thing. And the New Testament says the rich should learn to distribute. You know what I mean? Let me say, and also, like, someone who has gifts has to learn to share them. You can't take your gift, if you look at the parable of the talents and you consider the man with 1 talent who hid it, right? Imagine if the guy with 5 talents had hid them in the earth. How upset would the master be then? I expected so much more of you. And in some ways, that's the burden of life when I remember watching something where they say, like, telling kids they're gifted isn't good because it puts this on them. And I certainly have experienced in my life the sense that, like, it gives you a constant sense of failure because you feel like you should be better than anything you're doing. It's never as good as you could do. Because since you're a child, they're telling you you're underperforming. He's not living up to his potential. He's not living up to his potential. I heard that my whole life, and I believe it. That's what my teachers taught me. Thanks, elementary school teachers. Thanks, junior high school teachers. Thank you, high school teachers, for giving me that complex. I'm jesting in 2 senses. One, I'm not angry, but 2, sarcastically, it is a little bit like, I don't know what the right thing to do is sometimes on that front. You should encourage people to use their gifts. You don't want to overcharge them. And I feel something about people with their riches. I don't want to tell people what to do with their money. I don't provide you with something to do with your money because I don't want you to burden me with all your money. I mean, what I'm saying? Like, ministries that take in money are then responsible for what they do with that money. And if my ministry needed money, I would certainly look for it. You know what I mean? If God needed me to collect money for him and said, Paul, I need you to get a bunch of money together so I can do something big through you. Well, then God could show me how he wants me to do that. But since he doesn't, I'm not going to do that. I will not take your riches because I don't want you throwing your burdens on me, quite frankly. Because the rich has to learn to distribute and to figure out what to do with all that money. You got to use that gift in some positive way. You can't just sit on it. You can't just, like I said, I don't want to die with millions of dollars in the bank. It would seem, I don't know. And and then leave it to my children so they can what do I want them to do with it? Would I want them to live off of it, just feed themselves off of it, just spend it down and be unproductive people? Well, no, I don't want that. Would I want them to take it and just keep it in savings and then therefore just get richer with money? I don't think I'd want them to do that either. What are they supposed to do with it? Well, what was I supposed to do with it? I should help my children. I'm saying, but if I haven't helped them enough by the time I die, and I've got millions of dollars in the bank, right, or whatever, if that's a large amount of money in the bank, and my children are suffering, and I'm like, well, they'll have it when I'm dead. You know what I mean? It's funny as I said, because I know there's a situation just like that. Like whatever I could do to help you, I'm not going to do, and then when I die, yeah, you can have it all. And all I've done is, one, I've neglected my family. And now I've sat on this money like a fool. And God is going to hold me account for it. I'll have died possessing millions of dollars in my bank account. Or whatever. A lot of money. And then, what? So, a lot of the strategy, I don't know. I don't know what to tell people to do with their money. I don't want to, but I'm just saying, I look at it like my own talents, my brain. If I don't put my brain to work for the Lord, and so put your mind to work for the Lord in some way. I don't know how. I predicated my ministry on not needing money, and I have people who occasionally support and small support, and that's fine. I'm thankful, and, and that's cool. That's great. Let God bless you, in that. And, no one's giving me so much money that it's like a burden. Like, what do I do with all the cash? The small gifts and stuff that people send is very welcome and thank you. But, but like this burden, if God is giving you riches, it's like God giving you intellect and knowledge and understanding. You have to use it for God. And it is like a hot potato. You can't just get rid of it. You got to do something with it. And the problem is in the world, there's so much pressure to just just let that flower bloom, man. Get that fancy car, get that fancy house. When I think about obtaining money, man, I think about building swimming pools and stuff. It just comes to me like that. I don't think about building orphanages, which is probably what I should be thinking. That's kind of a dire thing to think of building, honestly, though. I don't know, maybe build marriage counseling instead of orphanages. Orphanages implies dead parents, though. Can't help that. That's not divorce. But that's what he says. What's real religion? Taking care of the fatherless. That's what he says. Remembering the fatherless and the widows. That's your religion. I'm so religious. I'm going to build a bigger new church. We're going to put a new wing on the church so we can have more people. Okay. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's exactly what's necessary. Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool, saith the Lord. Where is the house you will build me? Everyone's always building. I do appreciate more of these warehouse-style churches where they just buy a warehouse and they stick their name on the outside. Good for you. It doesn't have to be, I know they make it look nice, and that's fine. I'm not saying your building has to look like it's still industrial, or you have to meet in a, but whatever. Christians for years met in tombs. That's what ticked me off about the pandemic, in the Roman times, Christians, because they were persecuted, had to meet in the subterranean tombs underneath the city. They had to meet in secret, but they did it on risk of death. And now we have this pandemic. And after a few weeks, if you were really paying attention, and obviously everyone had time off, you could do something other than just watch the propaganda news. But a lot of people don't know it's propaganda news. They think it's just serious, and so they listen to it and they take every word like it's just Like they're hypnotized, really. The rich man in his ways will pass away like the flower of the grass. It's here today, gone tomorrow. The sun is no sooner risen with a burning heat, but it withereth the grass, and the flower thereof falleth. Riches are uncertain. Trust not in uncertain riches, the scriptures say. You know what I mean? Because riches are not certain. People think they're certain. Thieves break in and steal. You know, the government breaks in and steals. That happens too. You know what I mean? They break in and steal. Your home can be burned down. You know, and not only that, you're dying. You're dying. And what will you do? To whom will all your stuff belong? Well, not to you. It doesn't, you know, whoever you leave it to, it doesn't matter. It's going to somebody else. Eventually, it all goes to someone else. You ought to get credit for where it went. You know what I mean? It's not easy. Now, I know it's not easy. It's something I have trouble. I don't even know how to preach about it because I could talk about richness from my perspective, but it always seems a bit comical because I do think I'm rich. I know I'm rich. I've seen how people live everywhere else. Now, I'm not rich by comparison to the richest, but I'm rich by comparison to true poverty. You know what I mean? I have a responsibility. Fortunately, I don't have a lot of excessive riches. I live in a nice home, but it's not like I can trade it in for a lesser one. They won't let you even live in like a shack or something like that with a family, you know? Come take your children away. You have to have a certain amount of, you know, you can't, literally, you can't live with children in certain conditions. You know what I mean? You can't. They'll take them away from you. And you have to have a house and you have to have enclosed and things like that. And they can't, you can't be living in a cave. You should be able to some degree. You can make a cave if you can make it nice. I don't know if it's specifically no caves or anything, but you know what I'm saying? If you don't provide a nice home for your children, they'll take your children away. You can't necessarily live in a grass hut in the open like you can in Africa because of the weather, for one. Maybe in Florida you can. But any place that would become detrimental to the health or well-being of the child, yeah, they'll come and take it away. So you have to have some level of wealth. You have to have a home if you have children to take care of them. And that's all right because the Lord says you must take care of your own. He that does not take care of his own has denied the faith and is worse than a heathen man, it says in one place. So you are required to take care of your family. You're not supposed to just dump everything. Jesus said, remember he said, there are people he says, hey, I forsook all to follow you. And he was saying, do that. But you understand, but that was while Jesus was walking the earth. And to follow him, you literally had to come with him. But now the Spirit has come into the world. And to follow Jesus, well, the Spirit has entered into you if you have received the Holy Spirit. And you don't need to go anywhere to follow Christ. Except to where you are, wherever he leads you from where you are now. But Christ is not out there. He's not in the secret chambers. He's not over at your neighbor's house. He is with you. He is in he is in the midst of you. When you gather together in your church, he is with you when you sit and when you rise. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation. Okay. That's enough of that. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord had promised to them that love him. Okay. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. All right, well, hold on right there. That looks like a good little thing to think about. Oh, not quite enough room. But, the Father perishes, soul that wish to fit with ways. Okay. So blessed is the man when he endures temptation. Temptation. Now, okay, we know that enduring temptation is good. And he says he shall receive the crown of life. Well, what does he mean by endure temptation? What if we don't endure temptation, we won't receive the crown of life? The inverse seems to be here to be true, does it not? If we endure temptation, we will receive the crown of life. Now, because I think about it in terms of salvation, right? It almost sounds like, oh, that's the price. But it is sort of the price. We must endure the temptations. We will be tempted. Now, it says of Christ that he was tempted in every way like as we are, yet without sin. Now here, we feel like, okay, now it says God cannot be tempted. But the Lord Jesus was tempted. That was because he was incarnate, I presume. Because that's the only way I could fit that. They would have to be that because Jesus became a man, he became subject to temptation, yet he was without sin. And we see that readily when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and it was time to be crucified, and he prayed, if it be thy will, let it be some other way, but nevertheless, let it be according to your will. And asking for a different path from God and being upset in the midst of a sore trial like that is not failure. You know what I mean? I love that we have that example of Jesus in Gethsemane because it shows us that being emotionally affected by your situation does not make you a failure. And being not desiring to suffer the things that God wants you to suffer, meaning through desire. I don't mean will. Jesus was willing to offer himself, but he was not desiring to offer himself. And so we also often are willing to obey God, but not desiring in some specific way. Meaning because we're human. Right? Merely because we're human. Now, not without regard to sin. You know what I'm saying? Like, meaning it's not sinful to not want to suffer. It's not sinful to not want to go through some of the things that people have to go through. And Jesus demonstrated that. Now, so we have to endure those temptations without what? Well, without, without alienating ourselves from the will of God through rejecting the faith, rejecting God's will, if we know it to what it is. Like if God, like it says, if Jesus is saying, God, not as thou will, but as I will, no way. That is you have failed to endure temptation in that context. Meaning, if we're thinking of in terms of service, I guess, and because we could think of it in terms of just ordinary sin, and that is part of it. But ordinary sin is kind of like a small part of the trials of life. I would say I don't think ordinary sin is per se. Or by ordinary sin, I mean just the general sins that are common to man, like whatever, whatever. Like he says, lust here, lust. Then that's good enough to say you want it. Lust indicates desire. Like I said, it is not like I said, it's not the same as when Jesus did not desire to be crucified. Right? That wasn't about lust. So when it talks about when we are tempted. So we're not to say, let anyone say, I am tempted of God. Even Jesus was not tempted of God, but of the devil. Now, God allows the devil to do this. And of course, in the grand scheme of things, you could say that all temptation is part of God's overall plan. I mean, it's accounted for within what God has willed should be. But God does not do tempting. And he cannot be tempted with evil. Now that we'll talk about that a little more in depth, but I want to focus on us for a second. Neither tempteth he any man. Again, that's more of a reiteration of do not say I am tempted of God. But what happens is the way man is tempted is through his own lust. He is drawn away from his own lust because of his own lust, and he's enticed. Meaning the reason we find things tempting is not because God is tempting us or God doing anything else. It's because we lust after it. It's because we want it. Our desire for things which are forbidden is what makes it temptation. Because there are things we want that we should not have. And that's why when Christ was tempted, it was no sin to say, Lord, if there be another way. Because he wasn't lusting because not wanting to suffer is not the same as lusting after food or woman, whatever, money. Let's say lust here is probably desire. Let's look at the word in Hebrew, Greek, sorry. That probably is worth doing here. I just want to see what words we're dealing with. There's a couple in Greek for that. Okay. James 1. All right. It's interesting they put this in the contrast of the rich and poor. Let's see. Where is it? Oh, lust. Okay. Epithumia, which contains the word thumos, which is the heat part, desire. It says not will, thalos, or whatever. No, I'm thinking of thalos and bulima. I forgot the difference between blue and blue. Thumia means heat, though. Thumos. We get the word thermos from it, I think, maybe. I thought it sounded like thermos anyways, right? It means desire, passionate longing, or lust. So that's epithumia. It's a strengthened form of heat. Epi means to have heat upon, you know. That's what that sort of, if you look at the Greek Strong's here, you'd be like, a lying, especially for that which is forbidden. And it's translated concupiscence. So it is lust with a negative connotation. I mean, not everything has a negative connotation, but that certainly does. I mean, there is a desire that is not negative. Oh, sorry, hold on. Where's my words? I know you see them there by name in another place, too. Okay. So, and it goes to what I was saying about, like, what I've said in the past about just mankind in general and in election. God, God's election, he chooses, right? And he puts us into the world. And it says, like, all these things are working together, and God has this plan. It all seems inscrutably complicated, right? Just impossible to, like, straighten out for a man. And we trust that God is in control of everything, and it seems just way too complicated for that to be true. Except for the fact that God is much more, he's got a greater magnitude than we can even conceive, since we understand his power to be unlimited. And because only unlimited, if the world is created, it could only be created from something that's even bigger than the world. You know what I mean? The world isn't going to have been created by something smaller than it, or less powerful. Let no man say when he's tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with you. Amen. And what I'm saying is we come into the world, and how does everything work out? Well, part of it, God knows men, and the world is just put in a certain way. And when like I said, God, the part I was going to say is that people sometimes will act like when we talk about the negative predestination, which means like people who are destined to destruction. Does God make them evil? Does he force them to do bad things? Does he make them lust after evil things? No. Men, we go willingly. That's what I say about Satan. I remember people saying, how is it possible that Satan would do the things God says he will do, knowing it? I mean, wouldn't it be better to frustrate God's purpose and not do it? It's because he's made in such a way that he cannot resist. His lust is to do those things. That's him. God doesn't make him do that. God doesn't force him to do that. He just created the being who is that. And you can complain that you are that. But God's only retort is, well, would you have rather I made something different? Because then you wouldn't exist at all. You know what I mean? It's like, does the parasitic wasp look at itself and say, wow, I'm such an evil creature. I inhabit the bodies of other animals and emerge, and the maggots inside, that people often cite that and said that was when I stopped believing in God. People are the same. They're just as awful. You know what I mean? We are the parasitic wasps of the world. I mean, we are that heinous. I'm just saying, if you look at humanity as a whole and you take the worst of us, and there is horrors upon horrors of the things men do to each other and to animals and to whatever, and to truth. You know what I mean? And they don't do it. And God doesn't make them. He doesn't take good beings and force them to do things that are negative. What it is they want to do those things, and the Lord has incorporated into his plan to allow for them to do those things, but that it would still work out, that all things were working together for good for those who were his chosen. And so the temptation of man is not that God is leading us righteous men astray, but rather that our lust leads us. We are drawn away from the righteous path by our own lust. We are enticed by our own desires. So did God put those in us? No, those are native to us. They're native to you. That's who you are. That's why we need redemption. We are fallen creatures. We are not worthy of everlasting life. We deserve to die as we do. But through Christ, we have the offer of everlasting life. But the thing is, it comes at a price. His blood, his life was laid down. And so out of that, he asks us to put our faith in him. And the ultimate temptation we endure is that which is the temptation against our faith. And we must endure that temptation. We will endure, and the way we get to endure that temptation is by enduring every other little temptation. And that's what I meant by like ordinary sin. By ordinary sin, I just meant lust and things like that. But there are worse sins. You know, in Hebrews it talks about if after having received so much from God, not just believed in the gospel, but having tasted of the powers of the world to come, whatever that means. You know, I have some idea what that might mean because I feel like I might have come that far. If then we were to turn our backs on Christ, you know, we can't come back again and crucify the Son of God afresh and put him to an open shame and count the blood of the covenant wherewith we were sanctified as an unholy thing. You can't walk away from Christ and expect to come back. Not as an informed, deeply committed Christian. And some people, I hear them, they'll say they were or are. I don't know. You know, if you want to count yourself out permanently, you go ahead. But, I don't know. Sometimes when I always think, whenever I talk about that subject, I always think about people who are like raised in Christian homes, right? And they are, but then they get to college and they get led away from it because the religion was mostly forced on them. You know what I mean? Not that they felt like it was forced, but it was just assumed and it was presumed, and they didn't develop their own faith of themselves to a great extent. Meaning, the most important questions never get answered. But then there's very important questions that if you don't answer, will have you getting closer and closer to unbelief. And also we have to sort of come along in the faith and encounter God for real. Like if we don't really encounter God, if our faith is always through just the social environment we're in of the church and the people and our family and our friends, and it's just we're Christians and that's our brand, you know, it's like, or, you know, and we don't believe in this, we don't believe in that, but, you know, I mean, I don't want to mock just standard Christian life, but if we're not in the same time enduring the temptations and building up our faith to endure even greater temptation, because God wants us to be built up to endure even the greatest temptation, which is your very life. Okay, now we're going to kill you if you don't renounce Jesus. There was an issue with that. There were a bunch of people who renounced Christ because of fear of persecution on pain of death. And there were those they were called the confessors. And those are the ones who confessed Christ and died for it at the hands of the Romans. You know, they confessed Christ. There were others who denied him. And there was some question whether they should be allowed back in the church. I think they decided to forgive the penitents. And they probably used the example of Peter and such, and Peter wasn't facing death, though. It was a weird thing. He was caught off guard. I always said that. It's like you look at Peter's situation there. I mean, he did just the thing he said he wouldn't do, but the Lord was ready to forgive him. And so God can forgive it. You know, though it says, he that denies me before men will I deny before my Father and before his angels. So therefore, I would not take it lightly. You know, I don't never want to deny the Lord, but I keep in mind that many great men of faith have, and I don't want to take any comfort in that. Like oh, it'll be okay for me too. I don't want to say it's okay for me. I don't want to get too worried about it, because I recognize, I'm weak enough to deny the Lord. I know that. They could put it to me in such a way that my mouth would say whatever I need to say to get them to stop doing the things they're doing. Like, I don't know. I don't. Here's the thing. I've never been in that situation, so I don't know really. I'd like to think, right, that I would be absolutely unmovable. It would make my tongue tell the truth no matter what. And as soon as I see my tongue bridled in every little thing in my life, I think I'll believe you. Or I'll believe that. People say, Paul, you wouldn't deny the Lord, would you? Well, I'd hope not. And my whole life is an exercise in trying to develop that in myself, that strength of character, that I can endure whatever temptation, but especially if the price is, it's like, is the greatest thing ever. Now, a lot of times people don't pay attention to ordinary sin, and they think like, well, I may have all these ordinary sins, but I would never deny the Lord. That's a foolish thing to say. Because we're already, when we sin, we're already transgressing against the faith. We say we believe in Jesus, and then we do the things. We know that his blood paid for those sins. We should have stopped them, God calls us to holiness. He hasn't given it to us in that de facto sense, the way that Peter wanted the kingdom to be established on earth. When Jesus was leaving the earth in Acts, he was about to ascend, and Peter was like, wilt thou at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? You know what I mean? It is not for you to know the times or the seasons. We want God to bring about that final change that will change the whole world. But I'm thankful that it wasn't time in the days of Peter, because I never even would have been born to comment on it. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten less hasty about it. Why? What's the rush? And it's I tell you, especially when I consider like, no, I'm not ready. You want to see the kingdom restored really? You want to see righteousness really established? That's the thing. We have to see a real kingdom. We have to see real righteousness. The imputed righteousness is sufficient for your salvation, but it is insufficient for fulfilling righteousness in the prophetic sense. We all know the blood of Christ, it really cleanses us, right? But no one thinks that then you're going to get to God's kingdom and to fornicate and to lie and to continue in all those sins. Well, the blood of Christ is still making me righteous, isn't it? Well, no, not then. Even now, we ought give heed to it. If you've run with the footmen and they have wearied you, if your everyday sins are so wearisome and you cannot overcome them, or at least can't pay enough attention, or you don't think it's even worth paying attention to, because the thing is like, maybe we can't overcome them except by God's power. Granted. But at least we're mindful of it. Being mindful of those things that we need to improve upon, being mindful to lay aside, like you said, the superfluity of naughtiness, you need to lay it aside. Okay, so for God cannot be tempted with evil. To me, that reminds me of when Satan asked Jesus to throw himself from the pinnacle of the temple. Because Jesus there responded by saying, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And there he was tempting what he was saying. Satan was saying, throw yourself, because it says his angels will give charge over you and they will bear you up in their wings, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. And so he was waiting, and so he says, his retort is, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Because to try to, like, for Messiah, like, well, I'm the Messiah, God, and you need me. I'm going to throw myself off the temple and tempt you to let your plan fail by me dying. I'm sort of, temptation, remember, means to test. But in a particular sense, in a very specific, now, it's not that there are no tests. it said God tempted Abraham. Or did it say tempted or tested? He wanted to. What did it say? Let's look that up. Let's look. Because that's where I want to confront this, because I know that's where my brain goes to, is the Abraham. And maybe you don't understand what I mean by that. I'll show you. Well, because this verse, one time someone gave me a heck of a time with it, because I didn't really understand it. Oh, no. Okay, it's chapter 22, I guess. Yeah, look at it. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, take your son, whom thou lovest, give him the land of Moriah, and offer. It says there. Now, there's two ways I can handle that. One, I could either deny that that's really temptation, or it's a different kind of testing, which is, in character, it's different. He's not being tempted to sin. He's testing his obedience. And like I said, in a sense, every human being is on the earth to be tested by God. Not to be tempted to sin. And I think if you think of that as the way James is talking about temptation, he's talking about the temptation to sin. God cannot be tempted and does not tempt any man to sin. And now you can say, like, well, wait a second, he was asking him to murder his own son. Would that not be sin? That's the interesting part. But he is not enticing him. God is not enticing Abraham. Abraham, it'll feel good. You're going to love plunging that dagger into your son's bosom. You know what I mean? There is no temptation there. He's not enticing him. That's what this is talking about. James defines temptation here as that which is the target of lust and an enticement. So what's written of in Genesis concerning Abraham is nothing to do with temptation as written of here. I mean, we have the same word in English, but we're talking about different concepts of testing. There's a test that comes from sin that is an enticement of lust, but God also tests men in their faith. And just as Jesus in the Gethsemane, that was sort of like a moment of testing. He's not being tempted with evil in that case. He was tempted with all the same things we are tempted with. He was hungry, he was thirsty, and I presume his body, I assume when he was a teenager, he had involuntary erections. I assume he wasn't lusting after women, but you get them no matter what. A lot of people don't know that. But, what I'm saying is, that could be temptation to lust. Because the excitement of the male is normal. And I don't want to go into detail about that. I don't like to, I don't like to speculate about it. But, not much. We're not going to go on speculating about it, that's for sure. So when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. And we know that. Sin and death. The law of sin and death. The soul that sins, it shall die. And the things, see now, obeying God and offering Isaac was not sin. Even if he killed Isaac. Because one of the, God, who brings things to life, also brings them back from death. And so I don't know exactly how it would be seen there, but Abraham, in that, it was not a temptation to sin. There was no lust involved. Do you see any way possible that could be considered some sort of, it's just not the same. It's just a very different dynamic, because that's what temptation in that context is totally different. Okay, so I hope I made that clear. I'm not going to belabor the point. Let's go on. That's why we need salvation, because sin brings forth death. And we need the blood of Jesus, his sacrifice. We need to have faith in him that we may overcome death. And that's the only way to overcome death, is through the faith of Christ. Do not err, my brother. And there's no, and again, we talk about the works that God expects of us as believers, but we do not talk about them in terms of requirements for salvation. It's like, what, now you're in the church, God has things for you to do. And should you refuse to do any of them, you will be kicked out. I mean, you will be rejected. If you take the talent, if God comes, welcome to this is my son, his blood, and it's like, and here's your gifts, and then you just take them, look at them, and just bury them somewhere. Here's your gifts, just go do good with this. And you say, yeah, okay, thanks. I just want the insurance policy. I'll take the salvation, and you can take the works and shove them up your you-know-what, God. That's how people treat religion. You know, like, I'll take this insurance policy, thanks, but you can keep that, the extra. It's like when you join a sports team, who really wants to do all that extra volunteer stuff, like at the events? You just want to take advantage of the opportunity. The free salvation. That's what I'm here for. I'm here for the free salvation. That's it, Lord. Yeah. See what that gets you. Jesus told plenty of parables where he let people know, like, yeah, those guys are going to be out on their rear ends. If you show up at my wedding without a wedding garment, oh boy, you're going to be in trouble. Weeping and grinding teeth. In fact, there's no such thing as an insurance policy, just me. You don't have an insurance policy, you have a God. You know what I mean? You have to act like it. Remember, because he's our God, he's not our insurance policy. Do not err, my beloved brethren. Do not err. Err from the way of Christ. You know what I mean? And all these things. He's reiterating a lot of things Jesus said. Poverty over riches. Stability, especially faith in trusting God. He starts off with talking about asking God for wisdom. Get patience. Find wisdom. Right? Asking in faith, nothing wavering. Don't be double-minded. Endure the temptations. Do not err. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. God has a determinate counsel and foreknowledge, for which the world is proceeding without fail. And he is not, now people would say, how can James say that? You look at the Old Testament, right? I mean, weren't we just reading about Abraham, where he was about to kill Isaac and God stopped him? Did God change his mind? Or what about when God says, like, hey, I was going to do good to you, but now I changed my mind. I'm not going to do good to you. Whereas I thought to bless you, now I will not bless you. There's a lot of that in the Old Testament. Of God seeming to change his mind. Like, I thought it'd be one way, but now it's going to be another. And how do you deal with that? Well, because it's an undeniable fact. I mean, we're going to read the Old Testament. Tell me it ain't so. Tell me it ain't so. And so it's one of those contradictions you have to think about carefully. Because I know James is right. Everyone knows James is totally right. God does not vary. He does not. It's just like I said, like God is not, God, what was the quality I often talk, of his true purpose, he never turns away from it. Along the way, there are things which perceptually to men, from our perspective, the word I was going to use was anthropomorphic. They are anthropomorphic ways of speaking about God that are true in that we experience God that way, meaning we had an opportunity to be blessed if we would have heard him. Let's say you're going through a 10-year period and God is being gracious and sending his word to you and saying, if you will hear me, then you will live. I want you to hear me. I'm going to let you hear me a bit. And he says that. And then after so long a time, he says, now it's time to punish because I spoke and you did not hear. And I'm reacting to, and so I've changed my mind. Whereas I was going to bless you, now I'm not. But it doesn't say it just like that, but I'm saying it. You can read it like that. You know what I mean? But really, The whole thing from the beginning was set. I mean, nothing has actually changed. Only time has gone by for people, and our situation has changed. We run out of time. Things change for us. Things vary for us. And so our relationship with God is changing and variable. But God himself is unvariable, unchanging. He does not have outbursts of anger. I read from the Old Testament, God, and I like reading it that way because I need that human passion to understand the thoughts of God. But I don't think he expresses himself precisely as we do, though I suppose to some degree. Well, what I'm saying is like sometimes when I feel like I lose control. But I'll tell you what, they almost make it seem like that's what he'll do too. I mean, but it's because it's anthropomorphic and we're comparing God to men. Because we have nothing closer to God that we can compare him with. I mean, so we sort of are forced in that position. It's a bad comparison because men and God are so, so many degrees of magnitude separated, that we are made in his image. We are still very much not God. And very different from him in so many other ways. The differences being immense. Our thoughts are not his thoughts. Our ways are not his ways. He is the Father of lights, the Father of illumination, the Father of knowledge, the Father of that which reveals, the Father of opening the book, the Father of unsealing. But he is also the Father of seals and all those other things too. He dwells in the thick darkness whereunto no man can approach. Meaning, if God doesn't want you to see him, you can't get near him. But he is the light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. Whatever light that man has, it comes from God. It rains on the just and the unjust. We all inherit of his blessing. And all have an opportunity in life to hear his word. I say, well, some don't have an opportunity. They can't hear it. That's true. But partly it's true because they don't want to hear it. Just like lust. It's not that does God block our ears? It says he does. He sends blindness. Right? And that's true. But and he explains why in 1 Corinthians. Is it 1 Corinthians? Yes. It's funny. I didn't memorize, but I remember thinking like, oh yeah, I'll remember that it was 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 2, or 3. I forgot which one. But anyways, but Paul talks about this hidden wisdom, which God hath hidden in a mystery, which none of the princes of this world knew. For had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord. That's the thing, is that yes, God blinds people sometimes, because though in their lust, they hate God. In their lust, they do not want anything to do with God. If they understood God hides reality from them, lest through pragmatism and a sense of self-preservation, though they care not for the things of God, though they care not for the righteousness of God, they will take hold of God to save themselves. Even though they may be filled with hatred for all things of God. And God will blind them to the truth so that they cannot come near him. Now, sometimes people are blind to the truth, and it's just for God's glory, so that at some point in the later, he'll open their eyes, and their desire is for the Lord when they see it. A lot of people, because here's the thing. You could give a gospel message to one person, and it affects them greatly, and they're moved to put their faith in Christ, but then you give it to another person, the exact same thing. And they may even be in the exact same situation from the same type of life or whatever, and it has no effect at all. And that's why I talked about the same seed falls on stony ground and falls on good ground, but in the stony ground it shoots up and it withers away because it has not much depth of earth. And when it falls among thorns, the cares of this life and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word that it's unfruitful. I just want to turn off my ringer. Oh, there it is. Okay. It is an 815 number, though. Probably a doctor or something. All right, it's going to ring in a second. Tell me I've got a voicemail, no doubt. Sorry. I should just turn this off during a Bible study since I don't want to. Well, I like to have it on, actually, because occasionally I screw up and I don't have my microphone on. But then my wife could just come in the door. All right, back to the text. Oop, wrong thing. There we go. Okay. Every good and perfect gift is from above. The good gifts come from God, the Father of lights. That's what I was talking about, gifts. We have to use our gifts. We're given gifts. And there's something, all the apostles give this clear indication, like we have to be living the Christian life. It's not enough to just be thinking about it. Every good gift, and it doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but you're looking after perfection. You're concerned and looking into perfection. We're gazing into this open door into an infinite world of God, in which there is just a great many wonderful and things we can't even conceive of what God has prepared. But having received it, we got to receive it properly so that we can enter into it. There's an appropriate response. If we truly believe that God has saved our souls, there should be a certain enthusiasm that goes towards service. And I'll tell you what, it's funny, 'cause everyone has their own gifts and has their own abilities. It's like some of us, are good at one thing and not so good at the other. Well, we already went to an hour. I expected to look down and see we're a half hour into it. I'm done, I guess. All right, well, whatever. I didn't want to be done. Let me see if this is quite where I want to stop. Yeah, well, we can't finish the chapter, that's for sure. That's all right. I didn't intend to. Verse 18. I can't leave it off. We need to pick it up at verse 19. So let's talk about 18 briefly. Of his own will begat he us with the word. No. Oh, gee. I hate leaving it. I mean, it does kind of go. He gives us this great gift, and he begat us with the word of truth. See, that means the word is like the seed of God. Begat means to father. It means, as a verb, like to father someone. We don't have a word for it in English. I mean, we do have some words I can think of that aren't quite exactly the one I want. But yeah, it means to be the father of, in that technical sense, meaning that I beget children, right? And he begat us with the word of truth. The word is that seed that entered into us and makes us into who we are. And it causes us to grow into Christians. That we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. That's something we talk about frequently. And we've been talking about today without really mentioning it. But like that whole idea of that all things work together for good for those that love God, for those that are called according to his purpose. And the reason God calls us according to his purpose is because he's raising up sons, as it says in Romans. He is raising us up. We are not the sons of God. Jesus is the Son of God. But through faith in him, he promises that we can share in the same blessing as though we were the sons of God. And in fact, it's called the adoption. We become adopted as sons. We are not naturally God's seed or his children, but through the word of truth implanted into our minds. He enables us to become a kind of first fruits of his creatures. That's the most desirable. The first fruits is like the firstborn son. Jesus Christ is the first begotten from the dead. He is the firstborn. He has all those status things put up there. And we also receive of the same status to sit down with him in his throne as he sat down with his Father in his throne. And so we, as the first fruits, is that election call to glory. You know what I mean? That is what he brought us for. That's why we have to be on guard. That is why he wants us to be stable. That is why he wants us to look for wisdom and be patient, right? And to endure the trying of our faith. That was originally the thing. Remember when we talked about temptation, I said that was definitely specifically in terms of faith. And remember, the opening context, it was talking about the trying of our faith when you fall into diverse temptations. That was he said, count it all joy. Why? Because the diverse temptations that come, the wrestlings that come, don't feel discouraged. Hey, I've been double-minded. Well, you're unstable, but the Lord will give you the stability. But you got to seek it. I've been seeking it, and I'm still, God has blessed me in so many ways. And I'm patient to see the next one. But I need more. I know I need a lot more to measure up to Christ, or to measure up to the men that went before me. I'm far behind. I lag behind. I lag behind. And it's funny because I would call myself the least of God's servants, but that almost sounds arrogant in and of itself because I'm not that humble. I'm the most middle of the road, mediocre servant God has. That's the way, I don't want, because Christ is last. You can't be the last. He's the last. He's the most humble. He is the least among us. No one shall abase himself greater than Christ. And I don't want to get near that because I know there are many more humble, lowly brethren in the church. Can't say it. Okay. So he begat us with the word of truth. Notice that, and I also want to point out that our faith, it is God begat us. He begat us. How did I come to faith? God sent the word of truth. And like a man ejaculating into a woman, he ejaculated his truth into me. And I became a new creature in Christ, conceived as a newborn creature, being formed to be eventually born at the resurrection, a new man created in Christ Jesus, perfect and entire in that resurrection. To be quite explicit. That's the analogy. He sends the truth to men. And like my body, my human existence, let's say not my body, my human existence is like a womb, receiving the seed of God and conceiving in itself a new creature in Christ, which grows up into him, which is me reshaped into an image that is like enough to Christ that God will allow me to sit down with him in his throne. He will give it to me in that. That is what he gives us. That is what he begats us. That's how he makes us his children. Through a spiritual seed. And that's implied here. There's a spiritual seed. We are the first fruits of his creatures, the firstborn. That's why when I talk about the millennium, I talk about that the group that is resurrected as being in charge with him, because I think that makes sense. If that's or it makes sense with the scriptures. I mean, personally, I don't know what God's plans how they all work together and what, but then we will know better. Now we see through a glass darkly, then we shall see face to face. So we'll pick it up at verse 19 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in this study. In the face of these things, because God, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Yes. Okay, we'll figure it out tomorrow. So we'll continue in James chapter 1 tomorrow. Thanks for joining this study. Look forward to be back again tomorrow. And where's my outro music? There we go.
Make me to understand the way of thy precepts. So shall I talk